I'm Alex Frank. When it comes to judging the Bengals offseason, whether it's a success or a failure, it's important to remember, Jake, that it still feels incomplete, but that doesn't mean you can't want more with what the Bengals are doing or not doing.
Yeah, veteran linebacker still would make some sense, but the divide right now that I find interesting is between national and local media takes on the Bengals offseason.
It is very interesting, coach, but one thing you have to have is contingency, and it feels like the Bengals do not.
Well, you know what? That's the main thing. As a coach, you have to have a backup plan. Everybody needs a backup. So that backup it's next man mentality. Somebody goes down, somebody equally as good's got to step in. And right now, from a personnel standpoint, have the Bengals done that?
That's a key question that we'll discuss with plenty more on the Bengal Squad Show this afternoon.
Today, it's the Bengals Squad. Everything Cincinnati Bengals every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Queen City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From the jungle to the playoffs, the Bengals Squad Show starts now.
One of my favorite weeks of the year, even though my bracket is completely busted because I picked Florida to go to the Final Four and National Championship. We welcome you to the Bengal Squad Show on Locked On Bengals and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He's Jake Liscow. He's Coach Art Valero, where he will coach with his first game with the Orlando Storm this coming weekend, so we're happy about that. I'm Alex Frank. We've got plenty to get to on today's show. I am going to give my case for Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. We'll discuss that. But first, the big overarching topic. Oh, is that the right word? The overriding topic on today's show. Success or failure, the Bengals offseason. And Jake, you mentioned it in the open, and I find this very interesting. Some members of the national media, and Bengals fans love to get on the national media because the national media has some crazy narratives about the Bengals. Well, that's fair. But some members in the national media are actually happy with what the Bengals have done so far this offseason. Meanwhile, if you listen to Locked On Bengals with Jake and James, they're not. I'm not. Coach is not. Other members of the local media are not. So who's right? Who's wrong? Is it a success? Is it a failure? Gentlemen, go.
Well, I think the most pointed delineation between the local and national media on this is that the locals listened to what Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor and Al Golden had to say in Indianapolis pretty closely. And they talked to those guys on and off podium, on camera, off camera. And we've talked to people in the building. There's certainly a preference from the coaching staff as to how this free agency would have gone. And everything that the Bengals told us was that they wanted to get more done. We like the moves they made. I have said this, I can't even count how many times in the last 2 weeks. I like Brian Cook. I like Boye Mafe. I like Jonathan Allen. I think those guys all help this team where they didn't have players at those positions on the roster because Trey Hendrickson was gone and Geno Stone was not the fit that they hoped he would be. They needed an interior pass rush presence. Jonathan Allen, even at this age, gives them some of that. But when you listen to what the Bengals say and you pay attention to what the Bengals tried to do and you listen to what the coaches wanted, sentiments from the building, it doesn't seem like they think that they got everything done that they wanted to get done. And sometimes they just don't. Last year, I think they wanted to add a safety and they didn't. And we saw how that played out. There's a chance this doesn't go that way because other parts of the defense are better. They've added 3 pieces that are good pieces, and they have a chance to find an impact player with the 10th pick in the draft. So there's a chance that they can build a strength in part of this defense, and that can carry the weakness. There's a chance that these guys that were rookies last year playing turn that experience into improvement in year 2. And then they can be an average defense that we've been talking about for the last few years. There's a chance all that happens, but I think for us, it kind of ties back to where expectations were based on what was said in Indianapolis and what we've heard from those in the building with the Bengals.
And it goes back to, Coach, something that we've talked about. Something's off right now. There's not a total alignment between the front office and the coaching staff with what they expect and what the front office is giving them. And that right there is a big issue.
Well, I think it is. There is something that's very, very off. Management, coaches, fans, media people that are local realize, you know what, when you say all in, we're going to take you at your word because you don't speak that often. So when you say all in, we expected everybody that you're going to go all in, and hey, that's the way that Joe Burrow and build a team, not an offense, but a team around arguably one of the premier quarterbacks in this league. And just like what Jake was talking about, we've heard it all. And now show us. As far as the national media is concerned, they only go by what they can see on the internet. They aren't here. They aren't at practice. They don't see the moves. They're not deeply involved like Jake is, like you are, like the fans are, in terms of, what have you done for us? And what have you done that we can pack that stadium? And I think it really, really is a bad reflection on management that you didn't create more and you weren't willing to go outside your little box and not take a reach, but pay for a proven player, a proven linebacker. The 3 pieces they added definitely make it better. But you know what? There are 8 other positions that were arguably part of the most efficient defenses in the league. And 3 pieces ain't going to make a team.
You're absolutely right. And that's a great point that you bring up there because they did get better. And I agree with you. Jake, I agree with you as well. I love the 3 players they have because you can instantly start them on your defense, on a defense that badly needs an infusion of talent. But they have not covered all of their bases yet. And that's why, yes, it does feel incomplete. And again, there's so much to come this offseason. There's the draft. There's the next wave of free agency. I keep hearing that they could sign a guy like Bobby Wagner. Maybe it's another guy like Matt Milano, maybe Bobby Okereke. But I haven't seen anything yet. And the more days that go by, the more I'm going to think, okay, they feel like they are fine at linebacker when the truth is they're not. Now, if they land a linebacker in the first round in Sonny Styles, if they get a linebacker in the second round again, then okay, they have something. But the something they have right now is not good enough. And that's where I come back to. They've done a good job so far of beefing up the defense. But in terms of what all they need to do, I know, Jake, you and James set the bar at 5 starters on defense acquiring in free agency. Maybe that was unrealistic. It shouldn't have been when you saw how atrocious the defense was last year. To Duke Tobin's credit, they have gotten a pass rusher. They did beef up the interior defensive line. We'll talk about that in segment 3. But linebacker's still important. You are neglecting a position of need. And that's where I don't want to say it's a failure. But in terms of being incomplete, it kind of leans that way.
It was an offseason that we expected to see additions to all 3 levels, and they missed a level. Linebacker is kind of one level unto itself, if you're looking at it that way. So it's really they missed one position group. But if they had signed 4 guys instead of 3 guys that were quality, veteran, starter level players in the NFL, we would have significantly fewer concerns. We'd be talking about, yeah, it'd be great if they added another edge rusher. We'll see who they can add in the draft. But now it's every time we go through a mock draft, we did a mock draft Monday this week. Say you can draft Caleb Downs in the first round. And I know a lot of Bengals fans would love to draft Caleb Downs in the first round. Well, what if you can't then address linebacker and edge adequately? And those are the 2 positions that we're talking about them continuing to make, or we're talking about late in the free agency process, them making additions at those positions. You can't do everything in the NFL, and I get that. So that's where, if you do take a step back, so I was listening to Mina Kimes and Kevin Clark talk about this. They talked about it, I think on the 19th of March or 18th of March or something like that. So it was last week, and I was catching up on it. And I respect the heck out of Mina and Kevin. Mina is a bit of a friend, and so we've talked about the Bengals over the years a little bit. And when those folks are saying good things about the Bengals, it kind of makes you take a step back and consider. And the high level view, and I don't know if people are quite ready for this until after the draft, but the high level view is that, yeah, they could have done more, but at the end of the day, they still have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins on offense, and they're going to have one of the best offenses in the league. And the defense, the standard last year that we talked about all year was like be average, be okay, be below average. Don't be the worst defense as they were for the first half of the season that we've seen in the last 25 years. And they weren't in the second half of the season. They did play better. They got better results, and they did it against teams that weren't necessarily the strongest offenses on the schedule, but there was improvement where earlier in the season, they were struggling against some of the worst offenses in the league as well. And so when you take all that together and you consider that they could also add an impact player at number 10, there is reason to think that, like, okay, the AFC isn't great right now. They could put this thing together. It's still Joe Burrow over there. It's still Jamar Chase over there. It's still T. Higgins over there on offense. So the bar isn't Seattle's defense. You don't need to be Seattle's defense, right? That's not what we're asking for here. And if you can build some strengths and some competencies, then there's a chance that the glaring hole at linebacker, which is still a glaring hole right now, until proven otherwise, is papered over enough by what you've done with the rest of the defense this offseason. They have to get there. They're not there right now, but there's a chance that it goes that way.
And that's where I think, Coach, when Duke Tobin says we're all in, and they might be all in. I mean, they've signed 3 starters in free agency already. But I go back to, again, what Jake is saying. You don't have to be Seattle's defense, but why not try to reach and, try to go for a level that can get you to being better than just below average? Raise the standard a little bit on defense, because right now, I think what you've bought is top 20 at best.
Can I interject for 1 second about the
Yes.
all-in quote? Because we keep bringing up the all-in quote, and I've tweeted about this. It drives me a little crazy, actually, this all-in quote.
Wow.
What Duke Tobin said wasn't anything that indicated the Bengals were going to treat this offseason differently. Duke Tobin's quote about being all in was, "I'm all in. I'm always all in." And if Duke Tobin is always all in, what does that mean? What does that tell you that's going to be different this year? He's going to do it how he's always done it. If he's always all in. And it's about Duke Tobin. He's talking about his effort level, right? He's talking about his standard for himself. He's not talking about ownership changing the way they do business. That would, I think, be a different quote. So this all-in quote that I've heard people referring to since he said it at the combine, I think, was not the indicator, never was the indicator that it has been made to be by some that people keep referring to, like all in. Yeah, right. This isn't all in. Well, this not really what I think Duke was saying at the time.
That was my perception.
A rant.
I'm like everybody else. When he said all in, now whether it be him or me or whatever, all in is all in.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't mean it, don't say it.
Exactly.
Well, he wants to control that narrative. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, no. I agree with you. But you know what? And the other quote was, "We've done it before." When did you do it before? And why didn't you maintain it? That's my beef with him. You got to be very, very careful about how you, because people's perceptions are different. Now, do I think, I think they got 3 great players. I think any veteran linebacker now is putty. They're filling a hole that they need to. And they think if they get a name that's going to answer all their problems. They're on the last part of their careers. Now, if they draft Sonny Styles and then get a veteran, I'm all for it. They're better.
There you go.
But if Caleb Downs is there for him, and now you got two very good safeties, you better spend the rest of your draft choices on defensive people, because you still have front end and mid-level linebackers and D linemen that you have to address to make sure that you got better. And there's a lot of good football players out there. And there's right now, I think that there's a lot of players that are out there that are on the last legs. Now, if you're going to sign Bobby Wagner or those guys for a 1-year contract with the incentive of we'll add on to this based on how you play, then I'm all for it. But don't sign him to a multi-year deal because he ain't going to last because he's that long. He's that old.
Well, the problem with that is, and I agree with you, Coach, that'd be a great thing if they drafted Sonny Styles and signed a guy like Bobby Wagner, because then you have younger linebackers that are a part of your future, but then you also have a veteran linebacker for this year at least to show them the ropes at a position that is so important to an NFL team. But the problem is, if you're waiting until the draft to make this move, two things are wrong with that. One, there's no guarantee Sonny Styles is going to drop to number 10. And number two, what if another team is like, screw whatever they're doing. We're taking Bobby Wagner because we have a need and they ain't going after him. That's the issue.
Yeah.
You can't drag your feet. You can't wait too long. You have to be purposeful so you're not aimlessly going after somebody in the draft who may not even be a need for your team and then doesn't fit, and then you'll waste another draft pick. It feels like that's where this is going.
Well, no question. You know what? They're holding cards. We're playing 5-card stud. They just drew 3, right? They got 3 new ones. Would you be all in, to use that quote again? Would you put all your money in there or no? You got to fill it in order to play. And that's a gamble that you're taking when you're waiting around and not answering problems right away.
Yeah, I thought about this morning. Okay. The Las Vegas Raiders, who I love to clown because they are nowhere near the organization they were when Al Davis was there back in the 80s. You know what they've done? They've actually spent money and they've attacked their weaknesses. Like, they've had a very active offseason. And then here are the Bengals. Yeah, we might do this. We might do that. Pick a decision and go with it. That's all I ask. That's all I ask of the Bengals.
The one thing I guess you could bring up when you see a team like the Raiders spending like that is a lot of times bad teams spend like that and it really doesn't work. I'm not saying the Bengals did everything we wanted them to do. We talked a lot on Locked On Bengals about how we would have liked to have seen a linebacker added. And that's pretty cut and dry. I don't think there's any two ways about that at this point. Would have liked to have seen a veteran starting level linebacker added at this point. But I don't know if I'm too worried about what the Raiders are doing or what some of these teams are doing that are adding 20 players in free agency. That is a long track record of not working as well. Do I think the Bengals are perfect? No, but most front offices in the NFL are not in that regard. So I do think that there is a fine line that you need to walk when you're talking about the Bengals offseason that is, I think, fairly critical, right? Because I don't think that they've had a perfect set of days in free agency, perfect couple of weeks of talent acquisition here. But it is, I think, quite easy to go too far. And so it's hard to find that middle ground of, and that's where like the national narratives that I've heard from again, people that I respect in the national media, because I don't respect all of them, I'll tell you that. But the people that I do respect in the national media that have been a voice in the other direction, this kind of like the counterbalance. And I don't think, again, we're quite ready for that conversation. There are a lot of people that are just still really upset with the lack of an addition at linebacker after what they watched last year. But again, I think it's just an exercise in balance and finding the real path that is critical enough to not let them off the hook, but isn't necessarily an entire doom spiral because of one position on a football team. And maybe it does sink them, right? We don't know how the season is going to go. Nobody can predict how the season is going to go, but at this time of year, we're very prone to overreactions and swings of opinion based on one move or one pro day or one thing happening here or there. And it's a lot of times stuff that doesn't end up, or sometimes it doesn't necessarily end up impacting the season exactly how we think it does.
Coach, final thoughts on this particular segment.
Well, you know what? I think that when you bring in, and only as an example, when you start to refer them to other teams and you hear that the Seahawks added 30 new players to their roster last year, and New England, from a miserable year the year before, added something like 28. And you're saying, okay, that can happen here. And when you don't see all of those signings, or you don't see guys coming in to compete for positions, right now they've signed starters, not competitors, to make the other ones better. And I think that that's what what frustrates a lot of people. And I think that as long as they stay aggressive and they know who their choices are and they don't live in the past, I think, yeah, you got a chance. I mean, all of these free agents, we still haven't seen them wearing black. We've seen them on other teams, but we're going to find out when the season starts, do they measure up and whether it was a good choice or not. And the same thing with the draft choices. If at number 10, you want a starter, you want a potential, in your mind, a gold jacket wearer.
Yeah.
If he's not, well, then he's just another guy.
And you can't have that in a first round pick.
No, you can't. And there's been a lot of them. I mean, believe me, there's more third and fourth round players playing in the league than there are first. So, you know what? I mean, it's how diligent are you on your evaluation of each of these players, and not only evaluating them as not, and I'm not talking about like workouts. That's in cellophane. When they put pads on, when you're watching them on film, do they fit what you need? Do they fit the environment around them? And can they make a difference, not only on the field, but in the community? And that's what you want.
Yeah.
Drafting is hard, guys, and we'll see how the Bengals do. I mean, if there's somebody out there who could nail a first round pick every time, they'd be making a whole lot of money. And there'd be people banging down his door to get those trade secrets, right? But I think one great point that you bring up, Art, and something that we would like to see the Bengals do better, where I'm talking about finding fair criticism, is, well, what about finding those role players and spending on those guys to fill out the depth chart? Because there are some positions on this team where they're an injury away from something that looks like a disaster. And so those mid to low end deals, that is a space where I would like to see the Bengals play a little bit more and add some depth there. And so we'll see if they make any of those deals or not. And there's time to do it. They might start exploring these after the draft. They might not. They've got a lot of players on the roster that they'll fill out with a bunch of rookies for training camp and for the offseason program as well. So it'll be interesting to see what direction they go.
NFL draft less than 1 month away, 1 month from yesterday. We have plenty to get to leading up to that. And of course, much more to come during draft week and the immediate aftermath. But up next, I'm going to give my case for Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight Jr. I can already hear people screaming at me. What am I doing? Well, I'll tell you that case coming up next right here on the Bengal Squad Show. This episode of the Bengal Squad Show is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, well, a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. Well, this year, you're getting a major upgrade with Intuit TurboTax because they now have in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert and get your documents uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. So that ad player wasn't closing there real quick. All right. So Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. Obviously, two glaring weaknesses, to say the least. You could say liabilities if you wanted to. But here's the thing. When I think about the history of linebackers on the Bengals since I started watching them in the mid-2000s, I think of Brian Simmons, Vontez Perfect. I know a lot of people don't like hearing his name. Dahani Jones, Vinny Ray, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, Ray Maluga. There have been a lot of linebackers since Marvin Lewis became first-day coach in 2003 that have come in and have had good careers with the Bengals, which speaks to their ability to draft and develop linebackers. Maluga, I believe, was a first-round pick in 2009. So clearly,
second round pick.
he was second. Oh yeah, that's right. Andre Smith. Excuse me, I couldn't forget Andre Smith. First-round pick in 2009. Thank you. So we have seen the Bengals be able to draft and develop linebackers. That's good. And I think they could do it again when it comes to Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight. We've only seen them play one full season. And don't forget that this team, Zach Taylor and Al Golden, specifically and purposefully benched Logan Wilson, put in the two rookies, traded Logan Wilson. So the coaching staff in this organization are saying, you two are our guys. Could they be that? Maybe. I think they can be. And coach, this is where I have optimism. With a better defensive line and a better secondary, can that help two young linebackers take a step forward in year two?
Absolutely. You know what? For those two young guys to be drafted in the second and the fourth round, and all of a sudden be thrust into it, first time in their lives or their careers that they played 20 games. And I know in college you're now playing 14, 15 games, but that's 20. And you're learning a system totally Greek to you. You're not quite certain. So there you are still thinking. And when you think, you play slow. When you react, you play fast. And I think they learned a great deal, but I still think that the way that they ended the season, they still have a lot more to go to where they're all of a sudden their reaction times are so much quicker. And you know what, if I had players that were of that age, you know what, I would be on the phone with them. You know, if they wanted extra work, get extra work. I know what the CBA allows them to do, but hey, you got to work at it, and you can't be on a beach right now. You know, you got to be, and you can't be just lifting weights. You got to play the mental game, because that's what the NFL is. Everybody's good. And if you don't play that mental game and get that edge, then you're in trouble. Are they good players? Yeah. Can they be better? Absolutely, they can be better. But it's up to them. And you know, you made reference to the guys that Marvin had drafted, and Marvin was a linebacker, so he knew what he was looking for in a linebacker. And I don't know his relationship with front office in terms of drafting those players, but he knew what he wanted, and he got them, and they ended up being pretty good players.
Yeah. And I also think when it comes to Carter and Knight, you made the decision to start them as rookies in the middle of the season last year because you traded away a guy who was formerly a cornerstone of not just your defense, but I would argue the entire team. So you can't. So on one hand, like, yes, we want them to sign a veteran linebacker, and I still hold that belief. But on the other hand, it's like you can't just keep going through guys at linebacker. You have to have stability at that position. You have to give these guys a chance, because what if they then go off somewhere else in a better system and then they end up being good players? So you have to work with them while you have them. Knight's a second-round pick. He was an older guy coming out. Carter was a captain in college. I know they like those qualities. So you have to give them a chance, Jake, I think, even though you could still give them some help in terms of a veteran. That's where I'm at with Carter and Knight.
Yeah, I mean, I believe early in free agency, the Bengals were willing to bring in a linebacker who would be an every down player, and they were willing to pay that guy every down player money. So that tells you, I think, where the team's confidence level is in these guys. And linebacker is a position that can be tough to transition to the NFL. Go back and watch Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt early in their careers. It can take a year. It can take 2 years. Yeah. It can take time. And that could be the case for these guys. The downside with Demetrius Knight being older as a rookie is you're only very likely anyway, you're only probably getting 1 contract out of Demetrius Knight. Ideally, if you're picking a player with that level of experience in college, they're coming in and hitting the ground running. And the tackling issue for those guys is the one thing that, like, say they only improve tackling and they get marginally better with their eyes and being in the right spot at the right time and that sort of thing. If their tackling is improved in year 2, that's a step in the right direction. That's like the baseline step in the right direction. Hopefully the game slowing down for them, helping them to get their eyes in the right place at the right time, reading their keys a little bit more properly, getting their heads and I guess on a swivel. They're swimming a little bit out there sometimes, getting caught up in the eye candy and misdirection. If some of that stuff improves, then you could have baseline better players. And there's a big a big gap between what they did last year and where they need to be, which is why, we're talking about the willingness from this team to spend early. It just can be hard for rookie linebackers in general going into a new system. Al Golden was a linebackers coach that saw the development of Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt previously. And obviously now he's in charge of the entire defense. And in year 2 as defensive coordinator, this is very much a do or die season for this coaching staff, which is why I think there was some frustration in the building with the coaching staff, from the coaching staff, about the one more move that did not happen or has not happened at this point for this team. But they're going to coach the guys they have. At some point, the guys that they have in the building are the guys they have in the building, and they're going to do the best they can with those guys. They're going to continue to try to develop Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, regardless of who they added, because those are cost-controlled rookie contract players who can be difference makers if they take those steps in the right direction. It's just such a long way to go. And it's such a, to go back to the poker analogy that we're rolling with today, Art, like you're playing some long odds there, and you're hoping that you hit. And there's a chance you do, but the odds may not be in your favor.
That's where it comes to maximizing your chance at your best chance at getting a hit when it comes to linebackers. 2 things. One, and Jake, you brought it up, the frustration amongst the coaching staff within the building. They know that their jobs are on the line this season. They know that. If this season turns into a disappointment, jobs will be lost, and you never want that, okay? You want the Bengals to at least be in the playoffs this year, preferably winning the playoff game and contending to get back to the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl, because then the franchise is headed in the positive direction going into 2027. The other thing is, I think about Perfect, and I think about Vinny Ray, and I think about, okay, the Bengals gave them Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap on the defensive line. In the secondary, they had Leon Hall, who was a lockdown corner, Reggie Nelson, who was a ball magnet at safety. Sean Williams was also pretty good. So they had guys in front of them and behind them that were doing incredible. Coach, when a defense is working well in unison on all 3 levels, what do the linebackers look like? Like, what does good linebacking look like on a defense on all 3 levels that seem in unison?
One, great leadership, total control of the back end and total control of the front end. They know how to get lined up. They know how to line everybody else up. They're motivators, and they are playmakers, whether it be in the run game or in the passing game. They make plays, and that's how you become a leader, is by making plays. Now, you can be a Junior Seau and guess a lot of times, but a lot of times he was right. Or you can be a Derek Brooks and just make stuff happen. Now, I'm talking about 2 gold jacket wearers.
Yeah.
But those guys, that is what a good linebacker does. He is the quarterback on the field. That's why he's got a green dot on his helmet. And, you put that into 2 young guys, that's asking a lot. That's putting a lot on their plate. And if they don't get a second contract, then your choice may not be that good, because you're always looking. You want somebody that's going to be there, 6 or 7 years, so he can really feel the game out. And that particular position has total control of the defense, and he can get guys lined up. Yep. And I think it's valuable.
Asking a second-round rookie and a fourth-round rookie to do that last year was a lot. And you add on top of it the fact that there was so much shuffling around on defense, both in the front end and the back end last year. I mean, you think about Trey Hendrickson, he didn't participate in training camp at all. He was a hold-in, basically. He gets hurt middle of the season, misses the rest of it. And then you think about Shamar Stewart and all that fiasco that went down last year. There was just so many distractions where you had two guys that, I mean, look, they're great guys, and that's good, or great, if you will. But, like, they need some help. And that's where I hope that Boye Mafe and Jonathan Allen up front, and then Brian Cook in the back end can help, because I do think they can have an impact on Knight and Carter and their developments, because I do think you could see improvements this season. Jake, you mentioned it best, I thought. The fact that linebackers can take a long time to develop. Not everybody's going to be a Derek Brooks or a Junior Seau or a Ray Lewis, or even a guy like the Steelers have had in James Farrier or Larry Foote. I mean, it takes time for these guys to develop. Now, if you think that if you're listening to this and you think linebackers are concerned, I have another position that may be even of deeper concern. We'll get into that conversation next, right here on the Bengal Squad Show. This edition of the Bengal Squad Show is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Well, now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Well, now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the United States. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives LLC, a registered futures commissions, merchant, and swap firm. Back on the Bengal Squad Show here on this Tuesday afternoon. I can't help, quick aside here, I can't help but having watched March Madness this weekend. And, Coach, I know you lived in Louisville, and you probably know this name I'm about to bring up, Rick Pitino. You want to talk about coaching and getting the best out of a team? Rick Pitino is the epitome of that. Like, I would wonder if he came to Cincinnati and he saw what the Bengals front office is doing, the tirade that he would unleash on them.
Well, I absolutely. You know what? But I think the thing that has helped Rick out is the NIL. You know, he can go out there. He can go out there and now legitimately get the players that he needs, or he feels he needs. And you know what? St. John's has done a great job in the tournament.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Rick is an outstanding coach. But you know, as far as structure is concerned, one thing is Rick Pitino knows who he wants, and he goes out and gets them.
Yeah.
Or at least he's fighting for them.
Purposeful.
He never says anything to indict himself. And he puts it all on there. And I think that if he came in and want to restructure, you know, what's going on, it comes down to where's your money flow. And I think that, you know, and Duke Tobin might be in that situation. Yeah, he's all in. He personally is all in. Does he have a cap that he's got to work with? We don't know.
That's another thing too. I feel like the Bengals once again are kind of handicapping themselves. Maybe not Duke Tobin directly, but members of the front office are handicapping what this team can do. And now it leads me to this. The defensive line. I'm worried, guys. I know Jonathan Allen's a good signing, but I'm still worried about the depth at this position, and it's a position you need to have depth at.
You talking interior defensive line? You talking okay? So interior defensive line. I think it's actually a position that this is one position where they lost nobody and added somebody, right? So
that's good.
But by definition, they're deeper there, and I think Jonathan Allen is a quality pass rusher. Now, could they still stand to add at the spot? Is there a reason that we were talking about Peter Woods and Caleb Banks was a guy that we thought probably caught the attention of the Bengals front office and were potentially in play at 10 until their draft process went the way it did. And I no longer really think they're in high consideration for pick number 10. We'll obviously see what the draft brings and what the next month brings between now and the draft. But yeah, I mean, we're still looking for that high level impact player on the defensive interior. Instead, what they have is a rotation of 3 veterans who we would have liked to see them have this level of depth at other positions, BJ Hill and TJ Slayton, to go along with Jonathan Allen, and then hoping, talk about a second round pick who has escaped the spotlight in Cincinnati and to his benefit, but Chris Jenkins, really need to see that guy take a step after you use a second round pick on the son of one of the greatest to do it at that position, Chris Jenkins in Minnesota. So Chris Jenkins Jr., can you take a step this year? McKinley Jackson is a guy that when he's on the field looks like he belongs on an NFL field, but has had a hard time gaining the trust of the coaching staff to get onto the field. So they do go 5 deep here with players that I think belong on an NFL football field, but there's not necessarily that high-end player. I think what the hope would be, if I were to paint the optimistic picture of how this goes, if it goes well for the team, would be if BJ Hill and Jonathan Allen can, because they're both on the same team, reduce the snap count, the load on each other, and say instead of going from instead of playing like 700 snaps or 800 snaps in a season down to 600 snaps in a season, keep those guys a little bit fresher. How much of a difference can that make for them in terms of their productivity? Both of those guys have been on the field a ton, and into their 30s, maybe you get them into more of a rotation, and that improves your efficacy at the top when they are on the field. You get a little bit more juice for the squeeze when you reduce the amount of load on those guys. So yeah, I mean, it's another one of those spots where I don't necessarily see a high-end position group, but I do think adding Jonathan Allen makes it the one spot that, in addition to safety, the team clearly should be better at, because they've added and haven't lost. And I think Jonathan Allen, when you go turn on the tape, can still do things for you at a high level, even if he's not the player he once was.
Coach, based on what Jake's saying, and Jake, I do think when you say it that way, they have bodies in the room. But do you feel like there is enough contingency for if something happens like Jonathan Allen, maybe not panning out like Bengals fans are hoping for, or Chris Jenkins doesn't take that step forward in year 3 that we all think he needs to? Do the Bengals have enough contingency on the interior defensive line?
Well, you know what? They certainly have bodies. And unlike the other positions on defensive line, you want them fresh throughout the game. So like Jake was talking about, there's a rotation that goes. And you don't want to substitute good players for above average players, because all of a sudden now you're not in flow. You're not getting that pressure on the quarterback. And there is a rotation that goes on, that goes on. Linebacker, hey, you're on the field. You want to be an every down linebacker. You want to be an every down secondary player, with the exception of the nickel that comes in, the nickel corner. And you know what? They want rotation. They've got bodies. Now, let's take them up a step, a notch, just like Myles Murphy. He was a rotational player. Then he was asked to be an every down player, and all of a sudden he came to life.
Yeah.
And I think that was his benefit, and it was the team's benefit. It showed, hey, this guy can't play because he's got a great motor and he can do some things. So I think that's just like what Jake was talking about. You know what? If they don't have to play as many downs, then they're better down the stretch. And I think that's good.
Yeah, that's very good, because when you get to those division games, when you get to November and December, I mean, Coach, you know this. You've coached in the NFL long enough to know the NFL is a war of attrition. And if you have guys that are beat up, and if they can't stay on the field, games are won in November and December in the trenches. So if the Bengals can have, let's say Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson Jr. benefit from having a veteran like Jonathan Allen in the room, and they take a step forward this season, but they're not playing as much because Allen and let's say BJ Hill is still playing at a high level, that's a really good thing. It's a very good thing. And maybe we see Myles Murphy kick inside more this season. Heck, maybe even Shamar Stewart plays inside more this season. You have flexibility with your defensive line. Again, I'm just worried because if Allen doesn't pan out the way I think he will, and then you're worried about the young guys like Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson that are so unproven, and then let's say you don't take a big swing in the NFL draft, and I'm not saying go out and get Peter Woods at pick number 10. I'm definitely not in that camp. But if you don't, I mean, Jake, I know you and James talked about this on Monday this week. You guys picked Caleb Banks in round 2. That'd be a good pick. Second round defensive tackle, Florida, SEC school, a school that's known for their defensive linemen. Sure, fine. But I just, again, do they have enough contingencies? Do they have enough bodies? And is there a good enough level of talent to where they can complement what Mafe and Miles Murphy are hopefully going to bring off the edge? And maybe even Shamar Stewart takes a leap this year.
I think it's just tough to say that they could have done more here because they spent significant money on Jonathan Allen.
True.
And so where they could have done more on edge, and I think tried to, where they could have done more at linebacker, and I think tried to, where they could have signed, say, a slot corner in addition to Jalen Davis, who, again, I like, but they're kind of thin at corner right now. Could they have done more, at all these positions, tight end, backup offensive line, backup wide receiver? Yeah, like those are those small moves that I would like to see the Bengals get a little bit more proactive about making. I think it's hard to say they could have done significantly more at defensive tackle. Like they tried on Jonathan Franklin Myers. That was always going to be really tough. There's always going to be a significant market there. I would have liked to have seen them do the Logan Hall deal for sure. That one would have made a lot of sense to me. But they signed a guy who is still good as a pass rusher and can still do his job as a run defender, even though he's on the wrong side of 30 and Jonathan Allen. So, like, yeah, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. That's the case for Brian Cook at safety. That's the case for Boye Mafe on the defensive line, although Mafe might be under a little bit more criticism because of the guy he's replacing in Trey Hendrickson. And honestly, I've seen the criticism of like, oh, he's only got X number of sacks in the last 2 years, where he's been really good as a pass rush winner. He just hasn't been adding on the sacks like he did in his second year as a pro. The Bengals are banking on him being able to get back to that number, I'm sure. I have a hard time being too critical. They tried there, and they tried with a player that I think is a reasonable effort to try with. I don't have sky-high expectations for Jonathan Allen. I think he can be a contributor for them. But if I'm going to get on them for not trying at other positions, when they go and sign guys that I can see the vision for, this isn't like I was critical of the who's a corner they signed in the COVID year where he wanted to get paid.
Oh, Trey Waynes.
Vikings. Trey Waynes, yeah, that was one that never really made any sense to me. I was critical of that at the time, but I was also critical of them letting Carl Lawson go for Trey Hendrickson. Turns out the Bengals were right on that one.
Yeah,
and I liked the Geno Stone signing at the time. I would have liked to have seen them make a quick decision to move on after 1 year, but I liked it at the time. That was one that Bengals fans were linking to the Bengals strongly going into that offseason. So we're not always right about the way things are going to pan out, and that's why we have to see what happens when they're actually on the field.
It just feels like, again, from what you're saying, Jake, the Bengals have done good work so far this offseason on defensive line. But, Coach, again, it goes back to the theme we talked about with linebacker and the overall of the offseason. Have they done enough? That's the question that will be answered over the next month and definitely as we approach mini camp and training camp.
You know what? That's the one thing. They didn't lose those interior guys, right? They lost 2 edge players, got nothing out of them. You signed 1. Okay. Is that a draft need? I would say so. Now,
that's a good point.
You know what? They were solid players. Trey Hendrickson obviously was a superior player, and they let him go. You know what? There is so many needs, and you know what? We don't want. And I hate to be so pessimistic sounding, but I watched every game and I studied every game, and there was something lacking. And then some of the comments that came out, like, we can't dumb it down anymore. We can't, it's like, oh, that don't air your laundry out in public.
Yeah, you don't want to
You
hear
know?
that.
And that's your job as a teacher, is to get them where you want them to be and to continue to see improvement as a player. And sometimes you don't, and the bad thing about the NFL is you usually don't have enough time. By the time you're either going to sign them after year 3 to an extension, or you let them play it out, you don't renew their 5th-year option, and you cut them loose. And the draft is very funny, and so is free agency. And we can sit back and talk about what they should have done and could have done, and all of this stuff. But you know what? It's a show me game, and you have to be able to. And you don't necessarily need to be a marquee player to make an impact. And that's what everybody wants to see, is that name show up. And whether the guy can play dead in a cowboy movie or not, the name is there. And then they'll cut their losses later. But you know what? I'm not in the building. I don't know what their thought processes are. All I have to gauge on that is what I hear, what I see, and what the outcome is going to be come in the fall.
You know what people also want to see? They want to see wins. So it's like everything the Bengals do now, you can say it's good, you can be critical of it. At the end of the day, if they're 3-1 through 4 weeks in September, we're not having these conversations then. We're saying, you know what? Think back to when they did this offseason or when they did that. That's what we're saying. Winning cures all. Speaking of the draft, is BPA still in play? We'll get to that conversation next on the Bengal Squad Show. I find this very interesting when it comes to the concept of BPA, because I don't think the Bengals are in a position to where they can do that because of what they haven't done at linebacker and other areas of the roster. But putting linebacker aside, in my opinion, and I remember hearing a lot about this. This goes back 5 years ago when I was interviewing for a position at a radio station in Nashville, one of my favorite cities in America. And I kept hearing about how the Tennessee Titans general manager at the time, John Robinson, when he would nail his draft picks in round 1, it was because they took the best player available, even when there was a need at another position. So in my opinion, if you go BPA, you have a better chance of hitting than if you draft for a position of need. Coach, I'll turn to you. Is it true that if you take the best player available, I don't care what position he is, can it help the entire team, including one of those positions of need?
That's a gamble. That is truly a gamble. And I don't believe that in my mind, anyway. That's just my personal opinion, is best player available right now. If he fits a need, you go for him. And I know that's a kind of an easy way out, but you know what? There's going to be some great players out there that all of a sudden there could be a great wideout out there. There could be a great quarterback out there. And if he falls to you, do you take him? No, you already got some.
You don't need a quarterback.
Other needs, So do you do that? That's when you have to get into a position where if you know that somebody else wants him who might be further down, is your player still going to be available, do you think, and gain more draft credits? Or do you sit on it and do you take what you need for 4 or 5 years? That's what you're counting on, for that player to be, a playmaker for you. So I think the Bengals are in a difficult situation right now, that they really have to give it some serious thought.
Serious thought indeed. But Jake, as you and James talked about on the previous episode of Locked On Bengals, when you have a guy like Mansour Delane, if he fits a need, there you go. I mean, corner, yes, DJ Hill and Dax Turner are prime for contract extensions. But if you can take a guy like Mansour Delane and other guys aren't there you go.
I think the Bengals might be in a position where they can kind of say who's the best player available on defense. Because
that's still good.
like Coach said, like you're probably not drafting Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon. I think you could make an argument for Mekhi Lemon if you really wanted to. Like I think that kind of player is not a kind of player that the Bengals have on offense right now, and I think that they've been missing that for a while. But I'm not going to sit here and say they should draft a wide receiver. James Rapine will tell you that the Bengals should be in a position to draft Jeremiah Love, but I just don't think
I
they are. I
agree.
don't think there's a world where they can make that move. As there was a picture that surfaced today from Notre Dame's pro day of somebody wearing a Bengals shirt talking to Jeremiah Love on the field, and I haven't been able to identify who that is quite yet. Gotta zoom in on the picture a little bit and see who's underneath that hat in the photo, but they're doing their due diligence there. I just, man, is it hard for me to see a world where the Bengals can take an offensive player at that pick? I mean, there was a time when I thought, okay, maybe like Monroe Freeling, the Georgia tackle, could be a tackle of the future. But I think with what they're paying Orlando Brown, the extension that they got done there, I don't think that that's something that you want to spend money on. The 10th overall pick money makes about $8 million per year. So whoever they're drafting is a guy that needs to play right away. Now, does that take them out of safety? Does that take them out of corner? Because those are positions where they're either paying guys, Brian Cook, or planning to pay guys, Dax Hill and DJ Turner. I don't know. It shouldn't. I think that if you can get a player that could be the best of their position in a draft class, that's something that you should always be considering, and you should be trying to figure out how you can make that work to make your football team better. Would they prefer strongly to get a Reuben Bain or a David Bailey to fall to them? Probably. Or even a Sonny Styles, right? The guy that's considered this can't miss linebacker prospect, which is something that we have to probably unpack a little bit more at some point between now and the draft, because drafting linebackers in the first round is a risky proposition. Even if they are really, really good, they don't always pan out that way in the NFL. That's part of what makes the draft such a roll of the dice. But I do wonder how that the spending the Bengals have done impacts their draft plans in terms of safety, corner, the need to still add talent to the defense somewhere. If they feel like they can get a game changer, they still have to pull the trigger if they can get that guy.
So BPA on defense. Coach, that's still pretty good, I think.
Yeah, you know what? Jake brought up a great point. Who's coming up? What do you need? Not only what you need, but best available on defensive side of the ball. Shoot, it can only help. It can only help. And right now, like I said, they signed 3. They've got 80 others that they can maneuver and play. They're like chess pieces. You know, what best suits you to have to be in the top 16 in total defense? And if you're there with that quarterback and what you've got on potentially on offense, shoot, you've got a chance. Shoot, they had a chance last year, even though they were so, with Burrow being out, they still had a chance. So if you could be in the top 16, shoot, how many games would they have won when Joe Flacco was behind the center?
If they had that closer on the defensive line, and I think BPA on defense, when it comes to looking at it that way, your biggest needs are on defense. And we talk about this. The draft is where you acquire talent. Well, this defense needs a talent infusion. So can you imagine a Reuben Bain with Jonathan Allen and Reuben Bain pushing the younger guys on defense a little bit? Then you get some really good competition on the defensive line. Can you imagine Caleb Downs next to Brian Cook? And then Jordan Battle has, a veteran in Cook, a Super Bowl champion, and an All-American national champion in Caleb Downs to learn from. But again, I just wonder if they have maximized everything, and they haven't, obviously, because, Jake, you mentioned James wants the Bengals to draft Jeremiah Love. I'd quite frankly love to see what he could do in this offense. I mean, Coach and I talked about this a month ago. Like, you're in a good spot going into the draft, but I think you just could be in a better spot. And maybe they make another signing in addition before the draft starts. Do I think they will? Not necessarily. But again, it's still very early as the draft comes into focus. But you just cannot aimlessly pick someone at number 10. This is a very, very important draft pick for the Bengals.
The key for the Bengals to sustain success has always been their ability to draft. And when they hit in the draft, that's when you see them win in following years. When they have some whiffs, they tend to struggle. And it seems to go in these cycles that revolve around quarterbacks getting paid. They seem to draft well and add talent well when quarterbacks are on rookie deals. They haven't been able to really sustain that with any of their previous three starting quarterbacks, and they've done a great job of picking the right guys to come play quarterback, given the resources they've had available to them since Carson Palmer. And so that's the challenge here, is if they're going to sustain this thing and get to a place where they can be contenders for multiple years again, put together another run like they did in 21 and 22, they're going to have significantly more success in the draft.
So I feel like the focus is on this year, and that's fine. But you want to build to where you can have success for a lot of years with Joe Burrow. I mean, you've already wasted 3. So why not just try to go all in, as they say, for 1 year when you can do it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10?
I know the coaching staff's hoping that. They really don't care 10 years from now, because you know what? They are on the line, and they're going to do their darndest, and I'm sure they're studying and they're working. They want playmakers now, not developmental players. And so I think they themselves, they understand this game. They understand this profession. And you know what? When it's the greatest game ever, it is the greatest profession ever, and it might be arguably the worst business ever if you're a coach.
It's hard. I mean, because you're depending on others, but yeah, you take the fall if there's a disappointment in terms of the outcome this season. Coming up on Friday, does Joe Burrow have enough on offense to overcome a potential, we'll say, flawed defense, potentially again in 2026? Coach Mike Santagana and yours truly will be there to discuss that and more on Friday's show. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Bengal Squad Show right here on Locked On Bengals and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the #1 sports podcast network in America and the world. For more on how to become a member of the Everydayer Club, visit LockedOnPodcast.com/everydayer. For Jake Liscow at Jake Liscow, for Coach Art Valero, 45-year coaching veteran, running backs coach of the UFL's Orlando Storm, and Super Bowl 37 champion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm Alex Frank at Frankie_Natty. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great week. Happy opening day to all Cincinnati Reds fans. Enjoy the Sweet 16 on Thursday. We'll be back on Friday with a whole new episode of the Bengal Squad Show right here on Locked On Bengals and the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.